I am going to start this session. Welcome to September's Ask an Advisor session. My name is Todd Smith. For those who don't know me, I'm the owner of Level 5, a Colorado-based boutique retirement planning and investment management firm. This is being recorded, so I'd like to remind people, if you don't want to share too much of your personal information in a public forum, please schedule time with me or another planner on my staff. We'll be happy to address your personal circumstances. But we record this because everybody is so busy and they can't always make these. And so we frequently get more people that watch the recordings that show up live. So again, this is Ask an Advisor session. I like to explain to people that this is really just an open forum for clients and for others just looking for answers or want to listen to questions that maybe other people have. So it's not a content-based event. It's really just an open forum where anybody can drop in, ask questions, listens, just say hi, whatever the case may be. So if there's not a lot of questions, I'm not going to force it and force a full hour or anything like that. We'll just cut it short and move on and see you next month. So so that's kind of the ground rules of how this works. And if you are online and you can't speak, go ahead and you can put something in the chat box and we'll monitor that as well. So yeah, here we are. The fall push is here. The holidays will be here before we know it. I think we will have maybe one more educational component. As many of you know, we do at least try to do something quarterly where we have what I consider a master speaker series. It's either us or somebody that we bring in to speak about a specific topic. We did have an economic forum not too long ago. I'm thinking about doing that again before year end, because kind of the economy, the markets, things like that are top of mind for a lot of people, not only for the rest of this year, but looking forward into 2023. The other announcement or thing I want to mention is I recently, maybe about a month ago, kind of started a new endeavor with our firm. So I've launched a not-for-profit division of Level 5 Financial, and that's called the Retirement Resource Center. And the Retirement Resource Center's really vision is to become the best free financial planning, financial education, and financial advocacy group in the area. And we're offering that exclusively to a small group of folks that are either friends and family of ours or colleagues, as well as friends and family of clients. So those of you who have already become an advocate of the RRC, as we call it, thank you. If you want to learn more about that, or you have somebody that may be a candidate, we're happy to talk to you about that. Okay, so anybody online have a question that they want to ask, put me in the hot seat. I haven't been stumped too many times, but it happens. But I do promise if I can't answer the question, I have ample resources to find an answer for you. And Frank's trying to join. I keep admitting him, but he can't seem to, not sure what's going on there. There he is. Hey, Frank. I can see that you're in now, but I don't know if you can hear us or not, Frank. But Kristen, do you have anything you want to ask today, or were you just wanting to get together one-on-one?
I can ask a general question. If you had some money to put in for retirement, how would you decide whether you wanted to convert some of your 401k or Roth, or not Roth, IRA to a Roth, or if you would just put it in a Roth instead?
You mean
so I'm thinking of using the money to pay for the taxes of converting money. How would you figure out to do that? Or if you would just take that money and put it directly in a Roth? Would there be
Are you talking
a way
about
that
money
you would
in, yeah,
decide?
let me clarify. Are you asking about money in the bank, like cash money sitting somewhere?
Cash money.
Yeah, so if you have cash money that's sitting in a bank account or is not in any type of retirement account, the conversion isn't an option. And so conversion really is designed for money that's in a pre-tax bucket, like a 401k or 403b or 457, money that's never been taxed. And you convert it from that bucket into a Roth bucket. And so that conversion allows you to then recharacterize money that's never been taxed to after tax or ultimately tax-free money. And so that triggers a tax when you do that. Okay, so that's a conversion. So I just want to be clear on that. A contribution, on the other hand, is when you take cash money and you contribute directly to a Roth. And that you can do with any type of money. However, you have limitations in terms of the contribution limits and income in terms of how much you can contribute, et cetera. So if you look at, and I'm not so much the technician anymore since I'm more the business owner, but I think it's around 7,000 you can do the Roth, and then you're filing married, filing jointly. I think it's like 196 or something where you start to phase out for the eligibility to contribute to a Roth. So those are the two limits you have to look at. And I'll double check those. Frank probably knows off the top of his head, but does that make sense?
196,000.
What's that?
190, I think it's 190, it might be over 200. It's close to $200,000 of adjusted gross income.
Yeah, I said, yeah, so that's what I said, 196, but it might have been a little bit higher. So you can contribute anything to a Roth, but you have to earn less than that, which a lot of people do. And then B, you can only contribute up to 7,000.
If you're
Now
over
you could do that for you and your spouse, so that could be the 14,000.
if you're both over 50.
Right. Which she is in this case, but yes. Oh, somebody else is trying to get in. Does that answer your question, Kristen, or did I miss what you were asking? Diego. Good to see you.
Amigo, how are you?
Good, good. Kristen, can you hear me? Okay, well, I can see that she's here.
Can you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
Okay. So maybe I didn't ask the question well. How would you prioritize if you could do either one? Whether you should convert money or whether you should just put it in a Roth?
Well, I think it depends. Well, I don't know that you do one or the other. You would probably do both. So one is really a factor of cash flow. If you have extra cash that you want to shelter in a Roth, then you go ahead and do it. The conversion discussion is a little bit more complex because there's a number of variables because you're going to be triggering a tax event. And so when I explain a Roth conversion to people, there's typically two reasons you do it. One is because you think you'll ultimately pay, in the case of a 401k, you ultimately pay at a higher tax rate when you take distributions out of the 401k. So you're preemptively paying some of the tax now. And then the other is because you want to insulate the taxation of an inheritance of that type of account. So if a child or dependent or somebody inherits a pre-tax bucket like a traditional IRA or traditional 401k, they need to liquidate that within a 10-year period. They no longer can stretch that over their lifetime. And so that causes additional taxation. And I guess you could call it estate leakage because your hard-earned money is now being taxed. It's being forced to be spent in a 10-year period. Therefore, that person is already probably in a decent tax bracket that's being laid on. So they're being taxed at a higher rate and they're spending it faster. So those are the two main reasons you consider a Roth conversion. And that decision really comes down to looking at your tax return, what bracket are you in? How much room do you have in that particular tax bracket? And looking at, making that decision, if you're, it depends. If I have people converting in the 22% bracket, I have some people that don't want to convert in the 22% bracket. But if you're in the 10 or 12, I think it's pretty compelling. Tax rates are going to go up, as we know, in 2025 with the sunset provisions. Speculative in terms of, are they going to keep going up with the big kind of disconnect between historically low tax rates versus, high government spending and debt. Something has to change. So, a lot of people think tax rates have to go up at some point. It's a question of if they will and how much. So I think at the 10 and 12% rate, it's pretty compelling to look at Roth conversions. 22 probably as well, but once you get beyond that, it becomes harder and harder to say that you're going to be in a much higher tax bracket later in the future. So that was a mouthful for you, Kristen, but did that help at least? I don't know that you prioritize one over the other. I think you maybe look at both. If you're looking at idle cash that you can save, I think it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and contribute to a Roth, but then also look at a conversion strategy. We look at conversion strategies all the time for folks, especially when they retire. And so I just taught a master class on this. I call it kind of that nice corridor. The corridor is when your W-2 wages or your self-employment wages go away. You haven't maybe turned on Social Security or taken pensions, and you're not forced to take required minimum distributions yet. So you're in a lower tax bracket, most likely in that corridor. And so that's a great time to really consider a Roth conversion strategy at those lower brackets. And maybe you do it over a series of time. So it just depends on which bracket you're in, what your personal feeling is in terms of rates going up, and how much tax you want to pay at this point. Again, I'm getting long-winded, but I would just say for you, Kristen, and anybody else, what we do is we take your tax data, we then do a projection, and we say, okay, based on your tax data, this is where you are, this is your tax bracket. Now let's kind of project or try different conversion amounts and see what that does to your tax situation. And we can play with those numbers. If we converted 50,000, this is what it would do. If we converted 25, this is what it would do. And then we do that every year and rinse and repeat. And so in the master class, it's called filling the bracket or bumping the bracket, whatever terminology you want to use. Say you're in the middle of the 22, which is common. People will convert enough just to hit the top of the 22 without going into the 24. But that can be done in any bracket. So it's managing your tax brackets and then balancing that with your ultimate, goals and comfort level where tax rates may go. So I'll stop there. Questions, comments?
Nothing related to Roth. I've got an easy one and maybe a not so easy one. The easy one, hopefully, is easy. What age should people start considering long-term care insurance?
Oh, I thought you said Roth. That wasn't wrong. I would say mid-50s or so. Okay. Yeah.
And then also consider multiple other things before you jump to the insurance solution.
Yeah, I always talk about that. Yeah, so good point, Frank. Frank's heard me talk about this a lot, and it was actually on my list of questions that were asked this week. But I always tell people, and I had this very conversation last night with some clients, is when I say, what is your extended care plan? People's minds always, not always, but 90% of the time, they go to nursing home and they go to long-term care insurance. And I stop the train right there, Darren, and I'm like, well, before we get there, let's talk about the who, what, when, and where. I want to make sure you have a plan. I want to make sure that you have adequate cash flow, reserves, the retirement planning, and the income needs is going to make it. But let's talk about what is your extended care plan, because the likelihood these days with everybody living much longer is that one or both of you, if you're married, is going to have a cognitive or physical impairment that you need assistance. And the statistics is probably going to be in the home. The nursing care that we think about is less probable, and we don't want that to happen anyway. So let's focus on where what's likely to happen from a statistical standpoint. And that's likely to need some part-time help in the home. So let's start with that first. And so you're in Maine. What does it cost for somebody to come in and help your family? And so that's if, but that comes back to the who, what, when, and where. First is, okay, if one of us needs cognitive or physical help, who's going to do it? Do we want to take care of each other? Do we want to put that burden on the other person in the partnership? Or are we single and we don't have somebody? Is it friends, family, somebody from church? So you need to go through that thought process and have a pretty decent plan. Or is it, somebody that you're going to hire? If you're going to hire somebody, then what does that in-home care cost? Colorado, it's, in our area, 2,000 to 4,000, depending on the number of hours and how skilled that person is per month. And so you start looking at, okay, here's my retirement lifestyle needs. Here's my income, my assets, my income, Social Security, pensions, what have you. Retirement's looking pretty good. What is it going to do once we dovetail that 3,000 or 2,000 or whatever it is on top of that? And when I posed that to folks last night, they're like, well, that doesn't look so good. And so then it becomes, okay, well, how are we going to cover that? If we don't have the assets and the income, then you start exploring outsourcing that risk to an insurance company. So I think, Frank, that's what you're getting at. There's more considerations prior to even getting to the insurance discussion, but that's usually the kind of flight path that I take people through first.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I will say, on the flip side, what I found interesting, the more that I work in this space, is that there are instances that people that could self-insure, no problem. And what I mean by self-insure is like, yeah, I know there is a long-term care risk, but I have adequate assets and income to cover that. They could self-insure, and on balance, a lot of people are probably self-insuring to some degree, and they're offsetting the risk to insurance companies. So it's some kind of blend. It's not all or nothing. But there are cases where it makes sense for somebody, even if they could fully self-insure, to even consider insurance. And I always tell the story of a gentleman who, he's double-digit millions net worth, still purchased long-term care insurance. And the reason was because he didn't want his children feeling obligated to step in and provide the care. And so there could be instances where the kids feel obligated to protect the wealth, or because they just want to be good kids to step in. But by him buying in the insurance, it was almost a way of him saying, well, the kids are off the hook because I've earmarked this to pay for somebody to come in and take care of me. So there's some emotional and behavioral side to this that you have to consider. At the end of the day, Darren, it's really just figuring out the plan. If I can no longer fulfill my responsibilities to family. So
that makes sense.
That's
a better way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you have a newborn, for instance. So if you can't, now 2 kids, your growing family. I think that's the end, though, right? As far as I know.
Ship has sailed. Yeah, we're done.
So, but so if you can't, the long-term care, the extended care discussion, that's sometimes what I call extended care, because long-term care conjures up the insurance, right?
Right.
And but that's what it's all about. If I can no longer fulfill my responsibilities as I've defined for myself, for my family, what's the plan around that? Right. And thinking it through. And so you have to talk to your wife and things like that to kind of come up with a plan that works for you. Everybody's different.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
I'm really long-winded today, so just tell me to put the brakes on.
Fine. No, I mean, I love hearing you talk, so it's all good. The more complicated question. So we purchased an apartment building under our personal names. Is there a way we can transfer the asset to an LLC without triggering capital gains?
Yeah, you just do a quick deed. It's just a name and title. It's not a sale and a purchase.
A quick deed. Okay. And that's universal across states, you think?
I'm pretty sure, yeah, because it's the same thing. If you had a trust and you had a property in your name, you quick deeded over in ownership. So
gotcha. Can I do that myself, or do I need a lawyer to do that?
I think you need a title company. But Frank, I think, has done this himself. Well, he did it with a trust, Frank. Do you know, you don't need an attorney. You can just go to a title company and do a quick claim deed, I think is what it's called. Yeah.
I think, yeah, depending on how helpful the courthouse is, you probably have to go to the courthouse and execute something there. If they're, a lot of them are very helpful, and they'll say, here's what you got to do, and it's not that hard.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can go on the court. That's not a big deal.
Well, I would call a title company, just because I would say you do the quick claim deed that change the title, and then you go to the clerk and recorder at the courthouse to actually record it. So
Gotcha.
I don't know if your courts are like ours, but that might be an all-day affair. So I'd make a couple phone calls first.
Yeah, I live in Maine for a reason. I can usually get service right away at the court. So
Okay, yeah.
DMV waits like 15 minutes tops. So
Oh, good. That's my understanding without giving legal advice. But
Yep.
like our home before we had a trust was in personal name.
Yeah.
And we'd need to rename into the name of the trust. It's very similar. It's just another entity name. So it's a quick claim deed, changing the name, and then you go to the clerk and recorder to make it official.
Okay, cool.
So I imagine it's the same as an LLC.
Gotcha. Sounds about right. I bought I-bonds, so I'm pretty excited about that. It's a whole new
Good.
avenue. So seems
Yeah,
like
the
a-
I-bonds we talked about on one of our last sessions. We skipped August, but I think we talked about it in July. Great interest rate. Unfortunately, you can't buy them with retirement funds, and you have a limitation of what, 10,000 a year. But that's good.
Is that per social security number? So I could do all four of us?
As far as I know.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. So you gotta, and I can't buy them for people either. So that has to be done through Treasury Direct.
Should I withhold more just so I can do like the paper version on the tax return?
Say that again?
For I-bond, so you can do 10,000, through the portal, but then if you move a tax return, you can ask for paper I-bonds instead. So it gets up to 5,000 more.
That's a good
You gotta
strategy.
get a
Yeah.
refund.
Was that?
If you have a refund, you can direct up to $5,000 of refund to
Yeah.
buy additional.
That's what I'm saying is, should I increase my withholding so I do get a refund?
He's trying to create a refund so he can do
Yeah.
more, is what he's saying,
Yeah.
Frank. Yeah. So withhold more from your paycheck, so you create a refund that maybe you didn't have, then you can contribute more to the I-bond. I kind of like it.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 9.6%. Why not?
Well, that's only for the next 6 months. It could go down.
That's true.
Right. Still, it's pretty healthy, Yeah, I've advised others to purchase, with idle cash if they have it, or just to complement whatever else they're doing from an investment standpoint. It's hard to beat. So it's good. Good stuff, Darren. Good stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, no, we're excited. A lot of things are going pretty well. So
Good.
you still running?
I am. Yeah, I just got
Good.
back. That's probably why I'm talking so much. My runner's high. Yeah, I hit double digits on Saturday. So
Nice.
I'm doing a slow progression. I'll be at the half marathon 2 weeks. This is a pullback week.
Mhm.
So I think it's a week from Saturday. I'll be kind of at the half. So how about you?
I've got a 9-miler scheduled. I think tomorrow we'll do that. My daughter's school is on an island, and I dropped her off after a dentist appointment last week, and it was gorgeous. So I think I'm gonna do that, and then I'll just run home from dropping her off. So because we're only three miles from the school. So
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we'll have to talk. I'm worried because I probably should have done this progression earlier. I'm not a good cold weather runner, and so
yeah.
it's hard to get out the door when, even these last couple of mornings have been not cold by any stretch, but
Yeah.
cooler. Like
Mhm.
Saturday, it was rainy and 40, and I ran on the treadmill.
Yeah.
Which I don't know which is worse, running in a long distance on a treadmill or running in the cold. So I got to figure that out.
Running in rain is worse than running on treadmill, hands
Yeah.
down. Snow's not so bad. Rain's not so good.
Treadmill, I think, is punishment, though. It's like.
For sure.
So, anyway, good questions, Darren. Anything else?
those are the burning ones. I mean, we've got the will. At some point, we probably need to set up a trust. I don't know. I'm not, at what point do you tip the trust threshold, I guess, if that makes sense?
Well, I look at a couple different things, if, well, obviously taxation is one issue, right? So trusts are going to be helpful with people that have a taxable estate, but at 11 million, you don't have to worry about that quite yet. That's going to change, right? They're going to change the lifetime exclusion, so more and more people will have taxable estates. So trusts are typically used for two reasons. One is to mitigate taxation, but the other one is to have better control over the disposition of property. And so instead of using a direct beneficiary designation or payment on death like you have on your accounts, the trust gives you more flexibility, and it also gives a little bit more protection. So I like a trust for somebody like you and someone like myself is because we have minor children. And so instead of having a beneficiary designation go direct to somebody, the trust can now have more bells and whistles and protect the children. And so you can create a trust that has a trustee. You can have covenants inside the trust that says, well, they're not going to get money until they're 18, 25, and 82 in the case of Garrett. No, just kidding. Just kidding. But you can put that in, like they can't be abusing alcohol and drugs. If they have a problem, then they have to be clean for a period of time. So those are just examples, but there's many bells and whistles, and you can get really complex. You can also create subtrusts. So your trust upon passing can create another trust for the children. So those are the type of things I mean in terms of disposition of property and control that you don't have with a direct beneficiary. So I like it in your case, especially as you build your property empire and having little ones. So I like that idea.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna
it's not
house all the
necessarily, I'm sorry, real quick, it's not necessarily, I guess it is. I mean, it's how much property you have and how complex. That's a function of it. But it's also, do you have little ones? Do you have somebody that you want to protect them from themselves, right? So things like that.
Yeah, I gotta show off real quick. 1 second. Hey, everybody.
He's still not quite awake.
Yeah.
His eyes are closed.
Whoa, here he is.
Hey there.
Hi,
Good
this
to
is
see you.
Daxton.
He's getting big.
Yeah, so we went to the doctor yesterday for his shots. He's 90th percentile for height and weight. He's like shot up. He started at the 30th, so
Wow.
he's a chunk. You should see his thighs, man. They're monsters. Yeah.
I'll have to show you a picture of me as a baby, because I was a real skinny kid.
Yeah.
But I look like I ate a baby in terms of the ongoing rolls and the thighs. It's unbelievable. I look at him like it's not even me.
Yeah.
So
That's
Jabba
great.
the Hutt baby.
Yeah.
He looks healthy. That's good. How old is he now? Is he 6 months?
4 months. Yeah.
4 months. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah,
It's
good to see you too.
Jackson. What's his name again?
Daxton. Yeah.
Jackson. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
All
we're
right,
gonna
well, let
house
me-
all the homeless in Lewiston. I'm gonna go all Section 8. So
Really?
yeah, just make the government pay the rents, and then they don't complain much, and then just gotta sort of manage the crazy. So
That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, let me get to a couple questions that came in. Let's see. I think you covered some of them. Kristen, one of your questions, I was asked recently, when are you too old to convert to a Roth? And that's always an interesting question. I get that asked a couple times a week, some weeks, depending on the number of meetings. And I would, maybe Frank could speak to this a little bit too. I would say the power in a Roth really can be amplified for somebody younger in terms of contributing to a Roth when they start out, rather than trying to turn the ship later on in life. And so for somebody younger, the Roth and creating that tax-free bucket over time, it's a huge benefit, right? But when we talk about conversions, for the reasons I mentioned before, I don't know that there's ever a time that's too late by age alone. And it's really going to be a factor of your tax bracket and your tax situation. So you could have somebody that is just living on Social Security and doesn't really have any other income and much in the way of assets that could convert at a very low rate. It's just a matter of how soon do they need the money? Is it for them? Is it for the next generation? And where you are in a tax bracket. So again, it's never say always and never say never. It always depends, right? So any thoughts on that, Frank?
Yeah, I think you can kind of say that the younger you are and the longer you have to let the money grow tax-free in a Roth shell, the stronger the argument for either converting or contributing to Roth. The higher the tax bracket you're in and the less you have before your life expectancy would argue for less for a Roth conversion. So you gotta balance those two countervailing forces.
Yeah, that's a much better way to quantify that than how I explained it. So yeah, the higher the tax bracket, the lower life expectancy would make it less impactful to convert. So that's good. I like that. Okay.
I have a sort of question on that too. So we have kind of blended. So when we were young and dumb, we were putting in traditional 401k, but now we've got more Roth. Should I be thinking about some of that old traditional and converting it sooner than later?
Yeah, I mean, you could run a projection, say if we converted it now, what is the tax, and paying the tax, what does that tax-free growth look like compared to not converting it and not paying the tax? You probably come out ahead because you're still relatively young. But with two wage earners, you're already probably, I already know, you're probably in the 22% tax bracket. So anything you convert's gonna either be at that rate or even at the 24. So it's a numbers game. I think if you were 55, 60 or so, I would say wait till you retire, but there could be a reason if you can run the numbers and see what does it look like on the back end to maybe convert. And so I'll have Frank crunch those numbers for you. My in-house engineer here. Come on, Frank, figure that out, would you?
Please.
But that's what I would say, Darren. It's not a clear answer. But if you might be at the top of the 22, without disclosing your income.
If it pushes us over, then yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the top, just so you know, the top of married filing jointly 22 is 178. And so it doesn't give you much room to convert in the 22. So then you go to 24 and you're like, okay, am I going to be in a lower rate or a higher rate than 24 in the future? But that tax-free growth over, several decades would probably make up for it,
Okay. We'll take a look.
One of you has to retire, so just stop working and stay home, and then you just for Roth conversion, then you go back to work.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Oh, good question. Okay, what else do I have here? Oh, so this one is, I probably brought this up in other sessions, but it always comes up, so it's worth talking about again. And so part of the Retirement Resource Center that I talked about at the beginning, I don't think everybody was here. I have a new division of our business. It's a not-for-profit division called the Retirement Resource Center. And it's a very exclusive offering that's free education, free financial planning and advocacy for a select group of people, typically friends and families of clients. But I was meeting with somebody that was introduced to the RRC, and one of the things that came up was I have this debt to pay off and I also have this cash. So it's a common question Especially when I work with folks, most of the people we work with are just on the cusp or just entering retirement or already retired. So it's common, we have this debt that we want to get rid of. And we have cash or we have assets to do so. Should we do that? And actually, I hate to say it, but a lot of people do it anyway before they talk to us, and then it's kind of too late to kind of give them the answer. And so, in her case, she has some credit card debt, and then she has some debt, I think a vehicle of some sort. And so her debt is around 7% interest on the vehicle. And then I think the credit card debt is like high single digits or mid single digits, like 12%, I think. And so the question from her to me was, I have some money, but I need to catch up on retirement. Should I invest that money or should I pay off the debt? And I would extend this question to paying off a mortgage. And so I'll get to that in a second. So for her, even though she's already in her 50s and needs to catch up on retirement and probably needs to really accumulate and invest things, the way I describe it to people is you want to pay off debt that is higher interest rate first. So that 12% is definitely something you want to pay off first. And so if you have cash on hand over and above an emergency reserve, because you still need the emergency reserve, then I would knock off a 12% interest rate debt. It gets a little bit harder for single digit debt. And so there's no hard and fast rules, but there's a 6% rule. And the 6% rule says, if debt is below 6%, you don't pay it off. And if debt is over 6%, you want to look at paying it off. And it's a personal decision and it's kind of a moving target. But the reason the 6% comes up is, can your money invested somewhere appropriately exceed the interest rate on your debt? And so around 6%, depending on the length of the debt and the length of time, you should, in all likelihood, be able to outperform that 6% invested wisely. And so if you have debt below 6%, I keep it, invest, and you'll actually come out ahead. Stuff over 6%, it gets harder and harder to really say for sure that you're going to outperform that investing. So I'd be more inclined to see people pay off any debt that, is 6% and above. So in her case, I made that recommendation probably to make sure she has her emergency reserves, but pay off the other debt, one at 12% and one at 7%. Okay. And so let me tie this into retirees and mortgages. And so that's probably the more common question, because I don't work with a lot of folks that have credit card debt, et cetera. So the common question is, I can't retire until my mortgage is paid off. How do we pay it? Should I accelerate the mortgage or should I, take assets and pay it off? Dave Ramsey and everybody else, my parents said, pay off your house. And that's just the mantra, right? And so where interest rates have been kind of so low for so long, most people, if they're smart and they refinanced, have mortgages in the 3s, right? The 2 to 3%, depending, maybe even 4.5. And so if you follow the 6% rule, the mortgage rate is below that 6%. And so I would not advocate accelerating a mortgage or payment or paying that off. And in the retirement space, I tell people for 2 reasons. One is that arbitrage. It's not true arbitrage, but in the sense it's the arbitrage. Your money is going to earn well north of whatever your mortgage interest rate is. So even with that mortgage payment in retirement, you come out ahead. And then 2, there's the liquidity factor that people forget about. It's like, if you pay off your mortgage, now your money is trapped in your house. You don't have access to that unless you do what? Sell the house, get a mortgage, or do a reverse mortgage. So you have less flexibility in retirement than cash in the bank or cash invested. And so I like, people to keep their options open and have flexibility. in retirement or closer to retirement than having everything in a hard asset. So it's really those two reasons. And so you'd be surprised how many people scratch their head when I have this conversation and they're like, I never heard that before. I thought you're supposed to pay off your mortgage. You know, you're not supposed to have debt in retirement. But if you do a side-by-side number crunch, like we were talking about with you, Darren, you come out ahead even having a payment. So I just wanted to bring that up. All right. Sounds like everybody understands that. Let's see. So safe money. What do people do for safe money or liquid money these days, like money sitting in the bank? So that's a fairly common question. And so I had this money sitting in the bank. What do we do with it? And so if this is safe money that you're not looking to have any risk with, I will just let people know that, you know, the rise in interest rates, safe money is paying more. They're not as nice as the I bonds that Darren was talking about at 9, what is it, 9 something?
That's 6. Yeah.
But, you know, when I look at our warehouse, I can find, you know, 2, 3, 4 year CDs paying 3.5%. And so that's fairly attractive, even compared to what's sitting in the bank is still paying. I think banks are still paying abysmally low. So I want people to be aware of that. I also want to make people aware of what's called a MIGA, or a multi-year guaranteed annuity. And those are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And some of those are paying in the 4+. And so you need to be aware of that. Both of which I have to, you know, you need to be aware you do give up a little bit of liquidity because you need to keep the money in there for a period of time to get those rates of return. So it's money that you don't need immediately. Maybe it's part of your long-term emergency reserve bucket, or it's earmarked for a specific expense in future years. So I wanted to make people aware of that. And then I also, that ties into something I want to, when you bring up the word annuity, the annuity is an ugly word. And I just want to address that real quick and kind of the evolution of the insurance industry. And so I'm excited about them. I'm in the process of partnering with a firm on a solution around this, but even in my 20+ year career, and Frank can probably agree, has a similar sentiment, annuity has always kind of left a bad taste in our mouths. And so we've never really used annuities as part of our strategies to a large extent. And most of our investment advice has been in what we consider a market-based environment, not using insurance type products. But over the years, I've come to the conclusion, and I'm more and more in this direction, that, you know, calling annuities, and I've used this analogy on the Asset Advisor session in the past, but not all annuities are bad. Just, it's the same as saying not all pit bulls are bad dogs, right? Some pit bulls are great dogs. And so when you look in the retirement plan space again, there's pretty compelling evidence that having a fixed component like an annuity, the right type of annuity, the right type of dog in a portfolio actually adds to the longevity of spending in retirement. And that's the name of the game, is increasing income and making sure your money lasts for 30, 40 years sometimes for people, okay? And when you look at where fixed income is today, what's the 30-year right now? 30-year yield, I think 3.4 or 5 or something like that. You're not getting efficient income, you're not getting efficient yield from bonds. And you can see what happened with the bond market this year. The bond market took a big hit. It doesn't happen very often, but you'll find that there are instruments out there that are actually more efficient fixed income components from an income standpoint and don't have that downside exposure like bonds had this year. And so when you look at a conventional yield curve where the 30-year bond was, you know, paying 5.5, right? Some annuities were still 20% more efficient at providing long-term income than a bond. And then if you look at in today's environment, when the 30 years 3.5, it's more like 40%. And so I don't want to get too technical today, but I want people to be aware that I think they have a better place than they had in the past. And in light of what, the economic circumstances for people that are wanting income and stability, having guaranteed income for life at north of 6% is not a bad place to be, right? And then the evolution of insurance I was talking about, why I'm feeling more compelled to work in this space. Frank and I know an outfit out of Florida for many years that we worked with a little bit that has worked in the space of what they call low load insurance. And so what that means is that you can purchase some of these instruments without a large commission, and therefore they're much lower cost. And so that has actually evolved where now there's more and more instruments and products being developed that have zero commissions altogether. And so that's exciting for me in an outfit that really has tried to shy away from using high-priced commission products as a solution, because I think a lot of those products are sold very well by high commission insurance folks. That's how they get paid, but they just don't perform well. And so really having a solution in that area has been challenging from, we try to remove commissions from our business model, but then it doesn't matter. Even if you don't take the commission, it's baked into the expenses of those products. It's just how the insurance industry works. And so I'm now looking at partnering with a new group where I can have access to these same instruments, but they've reconfigured them in a whole different distribution where they've removed all the marketing expenses and all the commission is no longer baked in. And I did an analysis of somebody comparing a commission-based annuity, in this case, that they have through Northwestern, I think, or something like that. Or Transamerica, maybe both, and compare that to a non-commission, low-cost solution, and it was a lifetime savings of about $90,000. And so I'm excited about that because I think that from an advice giving standpoint, I've been hesitant to suggest them because they just weren't very good products. And then the inherent conflict of interest. This makes me a lot more comfortable to better serve clients and maybe get them to, because a lot of clients hear annuity and they want to run away, and I don't blame them, but here's a much better solution. So we're looking at the fixed income guaranteed component, maybe having more of that annuity, that low cost non-commission annuity, complementing bonds and more guaranteed as a supplement to a stock exposure. So I just want to talk that through and explain that to people, because I don't think I hear about it all the time. Oh, we don't like annuities. And I'll say, I didn't like annuities either, but that's changing. And so are you guys familiar with A shares, B shares, C shares, and mutual funds? So, and I'll get off this topic here. We're getting close to the top of the hour, but the insurance industry, as I see it, is evolving similar to the mutual fund industry. The mutual fund industry used to be buy a mutual fund through a broker, and they would sell you a share class. Share class would be an A share would be an upfront commission. And so if you go to your broker, you buy a mutual fund, you pay 4 3/4% commission for them to buy it for you. Or they could offer you different share classes, depending on how they're going to get paid. Then Vanguard and others over time developed the no-load mutual fund, which you're familiar with, right? The no-load means there is no commission associated with it, right? And so now, not more often than not, if you work with an advisor or buy things on your own, you're now buying mutual funds in the no-load space. Well, I think that's where the insurance industry is starting to go. Now when you work with an advisor, a so-called advisor, that's really just an insurance person selling you their product, you're buying an A share of a mutual fund. you're paying that commission up front, and that's how they're compensated. But I'm seeing it going away. I'm seeing that more and more going away. A lot of the major carriers, insurance companies are getting away from that. And you're going to have more and more no load equivalent insurance products. So I'm excited about that. The problem, as I see it, with having the commission baked in, whether it's a mutual fund or an insurance product, is where is really the incentive to service and give advice. If somebody is paid a commission up front, it doesn't suit itself for ongoing planning and ongoing advice. And so I'm excited to see any compensation removed from the product solution and the ongoing advice being paid in another manner. Because think about it, if you're an insurance person and you sell a commission product, you get your commission and you're pretty much done. And so the folks I met with last week, that's exactly what happened. They had all these annuities, but there's no retirement planning, there's no tax planning, there's no ongoing service, because there's no built-in incentive for that advisor or advisory firm to do that. So just a thought that was top of mind with a lot of conversations I had this week. So questions, thoughts, anybody? I'm just talking to myself. So
No, well, I like the thought of an insurance product. I've always thought of most like life insurance, whole life is a pretty terrible vehicle. But it's cool to think that, they're thinking outside the box and maybe getting things that are a little more investor friendly. I have one last unrelated question, if you think we can squeeze it in.
sure.
Delaying Social Security, why or why not?
So why? Because you get an 8% bump in your return, in your benefits by delaying it to 70. So I think that's a compelling reason. If you look at the lifetime benefit of Social Security, and you live long enough, it's pretty significant. So that 8% increase can make a difference in somebody's plan. Obviously, there's a crossover life expectancy. You got to at least live till mid 70s, 80s to make up for it, right? So that's
8% annually too.
Yeah, that's what I mean, 8% bump every year.
Yeah.
So that's a guaranteed return on your benefit if you live long
pretty good.
enough. So I think it's compelling. So I'm telling a lot of people to really consider that. However, the con is if you don't really have other income sources and other assets, you may have to take taxable distributions from IRAs, things like that. So that could be the downside. Running a retirement plan projection, however, you can kind of solve that. So when we do, create retirement plans for people, we do what we consider a baseline projection through 95 and say, based on what we think is going to happen, you have an 80% success of making it. If we delay Social Security, it changes it to 85%. If just so the plan kind of dictates that. But generally, it's a good strategy, I think, if you have other assets and income sources to live on. And the other benefit of it typically is if you're looking at Roth conversion strategies, things like that, it's enhancing that corridor that I talked about.
Right.
So because if you kick in Social Security, at full retirement age of 66, that narrows that corridor in terms of time, because now you have Social Security income that could affect conversions and whether your Social Security is going to be taxable, things like that. So yeah, there's that con as well, or consideration. And there was one other thing I was going to mention, but I lost my train of thought. Any other ideas on that, Frank?
If you're trying to shrink your RMDs down the road, converting or living off that traditional IRA income while you postpone claiming Social Security can help you in that regard.
Yeah.
Okay.
So good question. I like it, Darren. I like it. Thank you. Thank you for coming in and participating. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some interesting nuances though, because Social Security is very complicated. I know one client of ours who has substantial amounts of money and he's in his early 60s now, but he also has a child who's 6. And there's a child benefit if he claims. So he's going to be maybe the exception to the rule. If he claims at his normal retirement age, his son is going to be getting a benefit until he turns 18.
Yeah.
And that benefit that the son gets is far more than the 8% gain each year. So for him, it's unusual because he has a child that is so young at his age.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't see that very often, but that's a good exception. I like
They
that.
call that the Billy Joel approach, because
I was trying to think like who was famous that had a lot of young kids. Yeah.
he has several young children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this has been good. Thank you for participating, everybody. Darren, great to see you. Let's get in touch soon. Keep running.
Yeah, you too.
Kristen,
there.
I think you wanted to get together, so just shoot me an email or give me a call, Kristen, for a one-on-one meeting. And yeah, we'll be here next month, whether nobody else is here or not, doesn't really matter. I'll keep showing up. And have a great day, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care. Bye-bye.